March 31st, 2022. I'd ask that we go around the table and have members introduce themselves for the record. I'm David Hanson, the MLA for Bonnyville Cold Lake, St. Paul, and Chair of the committee. We will begin to my right.
I'm Richard Feehan, the MLA for Edmonton Rutherford.
Hello, I'm Whitney Isaac, MLA for Calgary Glenmore.
Evening, everyone. I'm Cyril Turton, MLA for Spruce Grove, Stony Plain.
Peter Guthrie, Airdrie Cochrane.
Good evening, everyone. Peter Singh, MLA Calgary East.
Todd Lowen, MLA Central Peace Notley.
Good evening, John Carson, MLA Edmonton West Henday.
Lauren Dack, MLA Edmonton McClellan.
Good evening, Warren Huffman, Committee Clerk.
Thank you. We'll now go to the members participating virtually. When I call your name, please introduce yourself for the record. I see Mr. Getson.
Yep, Shane Getson, MLA Lexington and Parkland.
And Mr. Yassine.
Yes, sir. Ahmad Yassine, MLA Calgary North.
Thank you very much, everyone. Due to the current landscape we're in, all ministry staff will be participating in the estimates debate virtually. Minister, please introduce yourself and any officials who are joining you who may be speaking on the record.
Thanks, Chair. I'm Rick McIver, MLA for Calgary Hayes. With me is my Deputy Minister, Rayanne Lajeunesse, Assistant Deputy Minister, Tom Liu, and our Director of Finance, Dale Fung, and Crystal Damer, Assistant Deputy Minister, and Ranjit Thermaligan, Assistant Deputy Minister, and Wendy Doyle, Executive Director of State Road. Apologies, Wendy. And those are the officials in the room with me, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. I'd like to note the following substitutions for the record. Mr. Richard Feehan as Deputy Chair. Before we begin, I would note that in accordance with the recommendations from the Chief Medical Officer of Health, attendees at today's meetings are advised to leave the appropriate distance between themselves and other meeting participants. In addition, as indicated in the February 25th, 2021 memo from the Honourable Speaker Cooper, I would remind everyone of the committee room protocols in line with health guidelines, which require members to wear masks in committee rooms and while seated except when speaking, at which time they may choose not to wear a face covering. A few housekeeping items to address before we turn to the business at hand. Please note that the microphones are operated by Hansard staff. Committee proceedings are being live streamed on the internet and broadcast on Alberta Assembly TV. The audio and video stream and transcripts of meetings can be accessed via the Legislative Assembly website. Those participating virtually are asked to please turn on their camera while speaking and mute their microphones when not speaking. Members participating virtually who wish to be placed on a speakers list are asked to email or send a message in the group chat to the committee clerk, and members in the room are asked to please signal to the chair. Please set your cell phones and other devices to silent for the duration of the meeting. Speaking rotation and time limits. Honourable members, the standing order set out the process for consideration of the main estimates. A total of 2 hours has been scheduled for consolidation or consideration of the estimates of the Ministry of Transportation. Standing Order 59.01-7 establishes the speaking rotation and speaking times. In brief, the Minister or member of Executive Council acting on the Minister's behalf will have 10 minutes to address the committee. At the conclusion of his comments, a 50-minute speaking block for the official opposition begins, followed by a 20-minute speaking block for the independent member, if any, and then a 20-minute speaking block for the Government Caucus. Individuals may only speak for up to 10 minutes at a time, but time may be combined between the member and the minister. The rotation of speaking time will then follow the same rotation of the official opposition, independent member, and Government Caucus, with individual speaking time set to 5 minutes for both the member and ministry. These times may be combined into a 10-minute block. One final note, please remember that discussion should flow through the chair at all times, regardless of whether or not speaking times are combined. If members have any questions regarding speaking times or the rotation, please feel free to send an email or message to the committee clerk about the process. Many ministry officials at the direction of the minister may address the committee. Ministry officials are asked to please introduce themselves for the record prior to commenting. Space permitting, opposition caucus staff may sit appropriately distanced at the table to assist their members. However, members have priority to sit at the table at all times. If debate is exhausted prior to 2 hours, the ministry's estimates are deemed to have been considered for the time allotted in the schedule, and the committee will adjourn. Points of order will be dealt with as they arise. However, the speaking block time and the overall 2-hour clock will continue to run. Any written material provided in response to questions raised during the main estimates should be tabled by the minister in the assembly for the benefit of all members. The vote on the estimates and any amendments will occur in the Committee of Supply on March 17th, 2021. Amendments must be in writing and approved by Parliamentary Council prior to the meeting at which they are to be moved. The original amendment is to be deposited with the committee clerk, and as a courtesy, an electronic version of the signed original should be provided to the committee clerk for distribution to committee members. I now invite the Minister of Transportation to begin with his opening remarks. You have 10 minutes, sir.
Thanks, Chair. Good evening. I am pleased to present Alberta Transportation's 2021-22 estimates. With me at the table from Alberta Transportation are Rayanne Lajeunesse, my Deputy Minister, Tom Liu, Assistant Deputy Minister, Construction and Maintenance, and Dale Fung, Executive Director, Finance. We also have a number of other department officials in attendance. Protecting lives and livelihoods is the theme of Budget 2021. That theme, of course, refers not only to our work to protect Albertans from COVID-19, but also protecting the livelihoods of working Albertans. It's also a theme that sums up the very mandate of Alberta Transportation. Our number one priority is protecting the lives of Albertans by providing a safe, reliable, and efficient transportation system. We also protect livelihoods by funding capital infrastructure projects that create much needed jobs today. The highway infrastructure is needed to move people, goods, and services across our province from High Level to Cardston, Jasper to Lloydminster, and all points in between. Alberta's highway network is extensive, with more than 31,000 kilometers of highway, or the equivalent of 64,000 lane kilometers, and it includes nearly 4,600 bridge structures. Almost 28,000 kilometers of our highway network is paved, and 2,500 kilometers are 4- and 6-lane divided highways. That's the highest paved kilometers per capita as compared to other jurisdictions in Canada. For example, both Ontario and Saskatchewan have less than 16,000 paved kilometers of road to maintain. Also, Alberta's current maintenance budget is already the lowest expenditure per paved kilometer compared to Saskatchewan, British Columbia, Ontario, and Quebec. Maintaining the existing network on a comparatively small budget is a big job, and it is the current top priority for my department, and that's something we cannot ignore. Albertans have been loud and clear that they expect our highways to be properly maintained. I've heard about it, and I know all of you have also heard from your constituents that highway maintenance is a core and vital service. I know this because I've heard from you. When we took office 2 years ago, we commissioned the McKinnon Report, and that report clearly showed that we are at a crossroads with our highway network. Do we continue to build new highway infrastructure, or do we shift our focus to maintain, preserve, and enhance the existing network? The importance of our highway network was highlighted last year when the pandemic hit. We had to make sure the network was in good shape so commercial carriers could keep the store shelves full. A network this large requires a lot of work and a lot of money to maintain. Investing in maintenance and rehabilitation now extends the lifespan of the network, which in turn reduces the need for full reconstruction in the future. Rehabilitation of the pavement can extend the lifespan of a highway approximately 20 years. And many of our assets are in need of upgrading and updating right now. Investing in maintenance and rehabilitation now not only extends the lifespan of roads and bridges, but these projects create good paying jobs at a time when Alberta needs those jobs the most. While we are focusing on maintaining the existing infrastructure, it is important to note that we continue to invest in critical economic corridors, such as the completion of the Calgary Ring Road, twinning Highway 15 near Fort Saskatchewan, the Deerfoot Trail improvements in Calgary, and the LRT growth in Edmonton and Calgary will continue. We recognize the importance of LRT development, not only for moving people where they need to go, but for the jobs that LRT construction creates. The province's funding for both Edmonton and Calgary will remain at $3 billion, with $1.47 billion for Edmonton and $1.5 billion for Calgary over the next 7 years. In Budget 2021, funding to Edmonton and Calgary for their LRT projects is $2 billion in provincial and federal funding combined over the next 3 years. Last year, as part of the Alberta Recovery Plan, we advanced several economic stimulus capital projects to help kickstart the economy and get people back to work. Some of those projects include twinning for Highways 3 between Taber and Burnett, twinning of Highway 11 from Red Deer West to Rocky Mountain House, the Bow River Bridge on Southeast Stony Trail, and Highway 40 widening between Hinton and Grand Cache. These projects are still very much on the books, and this year, early works such as utility relocation and land acquisition will take place. As with all projects, timelines are continually being evaluated to achieve successful completion, taking into account cost effectiveness. We are always open to new ideas and creative ways to get things done, and in the past year, 2 capital projects were advanced thanks to that creative thinking. We have partnered with the Municipal District of Greenview and County of Grand Prairie to cost share the twinning of Highway 40 south of Grand Prairie. And last year, industry and municipal leaders in Northwest Calgary have advocated for a toll to construct a new Highway 697 bridge, including letters of support. My department proceeded with an engagement in August 2020 to inform development of the Financing Alberta Strategic Transportation Act, also known as FAST, which was passed in December 2020. The engagement included gathering perspectives from local municipal and industry sector stakeholders, such as forestry, agriculture, trucking, and construction. The Crete Chamber of Commerce and Indigenous communities were also consulted through in-person and online workshops. The legislation allows for the implementation of tolls to finance new infrastructure projects for the first time. This legislation only allows a toll highway to be designated if for new or expanding infrastructure that would increase capacity, and after stakeholder engagement has taken place, and if a non-toll alternative route is available, or stakeholder engagement supports proceeding without a non-toll alternative route. The first project under the Act will be the construction of a bridge over the Peace River on Highway 697 to replace the aging Crete Ferry. Both of these projects would not have proceeded without this kind of innovative thinking. Budget 2021 invests $7 billion over 3 years in the capital plan, which includes $2.4 billion for planning, design, and construction of roads and bridges, $1.5 billion in capital maintenance and renewal for highway and bridge rehabilitation and replacement projects, an increase from last budget, $311 million for water management and flood mitigation, and $2.8 billion for capital grants to municipalities. With continuous funding for the Springbank Off-Stream Reservoir, also known as SR1, in Budget 2021, our government is demonstrating its commitment to protecting the City of Calgary and all of southern Alberta from future flooding so that we do not see a repeat of the tragic events from 2013. We continue to work through the regulatory process for SR1 and are approaching conclusion with both the federal and provincial regulators. It is anticipated that approvals from both regulators could be received by summer 2021. In mid-2020, the Alberta Recovery Plan included $200 million in capital grants for water infrastructure projects and the Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Program, also known as STIP. We are extending funding of an additional $25 million for STIP to support municipalities in improving critical local transportation infrastructure. As part of the ongoing commitment to ensure all Albertans have reliable, clean drinking water and effective wastewater services, we will continue in the upcoming years to deliver the remaining water grant stimulus funding that started in 2021 from the Alberta Recovery Plan. These water grants are being provided to municipalities through the Department's Alberta Municipal Water Wastewater Partnership, the Water for Life program, and the First Nations Water Tie-In program. This budget maintains our commitment to provide grants on approved municipal transit projects under the Green Transit Incentive Programs, also known as Green Trip. And we are building and repairing water management infrastructure, providing irrigation to the agriculture sector and flood mitigation protection for communities across the province. While we keep safety front and center, we also have to make sure anyone using our highway is doing so in a safe, responsible manner. The Alberta government remains committed to ensuring that all road users have proper training. We are making real headway in providing fast and convenient access to road tests for all Albertans. In fact, by privatizing Class 4, 5, and 6 road tests in January, we have significantly increased the availability for these high-demand license classes and reduced wait times for Albertans. The successful transition has delivered on this government's commitment to improve this service. And we're fully committed to the mandatory entry-level training, or MELT, for commercial drivers, The previous government introduced MELT and had no implementation plan. In contrast, we are fixing this problem by actively implementing solutions to improve the safety for commercial carriers. Another major safety initiative came into effect last December to initially address impaired driving. This initiative will be expanding its scope in the upcoming year to include other traffic offenses under the Traffic Safety Act. The Provincial Administrative Penalties Act updates the strengths and strengthens impaired driving laws in Albertans, also known as Safe Roads Alberta. Under these new rules, there are significant penalties: fines up to $2,000, vehicle seizures up to 30 days, mandatory ignition interlock for repeat offenders. These changes make impaired driving laws in Alberta amongst the toughest in Canada. Aside from that, maintaining and upgrading our highway network protects lives and livelihoods and keeps Albertans moving safely on a highway system they can rely on. Folks, there's a lot of work been done and a lot of work left to do. Today, I would like to thank you for your time. I am pleased to be here, and I look forward to answering any questions, Mr. Chair, as they may arise.
Thank you very much, Minister. For the next 50 minutes that follow, members of the official opposition and the minister may speak. The timer will be set for 20-minute intervals, so you're aware of the time. Would you like to combine your time with the ministers, go back and forth?
That would be my preference, please.
Thank you. You're in agreement, Mr. Minister?
At your service, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Dack, I believe you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hanson, as chair. I appreciate your time, and that time of all the officials who have spent so much time preparing today is much appreciated. And the Minister, nice to see you this evening. Now, I'd like to get started off with probably the largest topic on your plate right now, Mr. Minister, and that's the Green Line project in Calgary that you're intimately familiar with. You've been a champion of LRT in Calgary since days of your tenure as a councillor there, and you profess through your budget to be putting money forward to commit to the construction of the Green Line, yet even though this Green Line project in Calgary will be the province's largest infrastructure build with a final price tag of about $5 billion, 3 levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal, in 2019 agreed to a funding formula, each sharing about a third of the cost. The province and the feds are committed to about $1.53 billion each, but we don't really see any evidence that you're prepared to move forward as a province and fund this project. It seems as though the province is looking to put roadblocks up in front of this project and either halt it or really severely drag it out and prevent it from going forward. The City of Calgary is concerned about it and wondering why the province is not giving the green light to the Green Line. It'll produce about 20,000 desperately needed, well-paying jobs to Calgarians. The line will be a significant economic driver to reviving the economic viability of Calgary's downtown. All Calgarians, indeed all Albertans, wonder why you're blocking this project from getting underway. Now, Premier said in an October 20 article that he expected the, quote, clear and objective provincial review of the Green Line project to be released later that month. So far, no one has seen that report. The province has failed to release the results of the review to anyone, not to the public, not to the Green Line Board, not to the City of Calgary. Yet you claim the contents of the report raise concerns about procurement practices of the project that you need to iron out with the City of Calgary. Are you therefore withholding funding of the project from the province? Will you commit today to tabling the provincial review of the project with this committee?
Thanks, Chair. I think the question's asked now, so I'll jump in. Thank you. I would say to the honourable member that as opposed to the characterization that he is making in his question, we're actually enabling the Green Line project to go forward. In fact, our team from Alberta Transportation, I'm getting a terrible feedback here. I don't know why. I'll just carry on, but in fact, our people are working very cooperatively with the city people, and let me compliment the City of Calgary's people, who I'm told are working very cooperatively with us. Our goal, of course, is to get the project built, to make it something that not only will make sense now from a risk managed and financially sustainable format, but also something that Calgarians and all Albertans can be proud of for the next 100 years. I support the goals of the LRT construction in Calgary, and let me say this: it's the project's undergone multiple changes in design and scope, and there's some complicated pieces of it that we're working together with the city on. We want to make sure that after as the member said, after the latest design, the government launched a review of the Green Line to ensure the project was technically and financially sound. So again, we're working with the city. And again, as far as timing goes, I don't want to box myself into a date, but let me say this, and I've said it publicly many times, sooner is better than later, honorable member. So we're hoping that we can come to a place where we agree with the city and they agree with us, and I think we're headed for that place where we can go forward
Minister,
together.
thank you. If I may interrupt, I do agree with you. The sooner is better than later, and the citizens of Calgary certainly agree with that. And for the life of me, sir, it seems as though your track record would lend one to believe that really is your intent, to get shovels in the ground. But there really does seem to be an intent, with all due respect, on the part of the province to put a wall up to the start of this project, to the extent that the city doesn't feel comfortable going ahead. They've stopped procurement on phase 1, and they've done so because of the questions that the report that you've commissioned have raised. But the city is at a loss to know exactly what that report is saying to you that would cause you to say we need to iron some things out. And the city of Calgary has been demanding that report be published, or be released to them at least, not to publicly release it, because there are some commercial sensitivities, but to release it to them. So you haven't been willing to do that, and that seems to be the holdup. There seems to be some information in that report that's giving you a reason to hold up this hugely important project to Calgary, $20,000 jobs that Calgary's waiting to take advantage of. And I think the city of Calgary and all the citizens of Calgary deserve an answer that really is something that's believable when you say that you're wanting this project to go forward. What is actually in that report that is giving you such concern that you won't release the provincial funds and get shovels in the ground? I know that the city wants to see the report. I know that even the Green Line board would like to see the report. This committee, I think, deserves to see the report. So why won't you at least make it available to bodies in confidence, such as the Green Line board or this committee, sir?
Well, let me say that our commitment to the Green Line is there. We expressed that by putting it into legislation, the funding schedule for the Green Line. We are working with the project. About the piece of the Green Line that the city has started the procurement process on, actually it starts in the southeast part of the city, which is fine, and it ends, frankly, in Inglewood, which is a beautiful community, so I don't want to knock Inglewood. It's a great place to be, but it doesn't actually connect to the rest of the LRT line. So we're working,
did you not?
We're working actively together, our people, with the city to get through the technical challenges to get from Inglewood to the rest of the LRT line. And again, I'll say it out loud because it's important to know the city's working very cooperatively with us. I think they understand exactly what's needed, and we're hoping that together we can get to that place where the people that in Southeast Calgary that get on the LRT will be connected to every other LRT station in the system, and not only to the new line.
I understand what you're saying, but the terminus of the line at Inglewood, you've described as nowhere, as a line to nowhere. And of course, that's the type of discourse that the cities really didn't appreciate very much, and it poisoned the atmosphere. And unfortunately, that's the city characterizes the relationship a little differently than you do as far as cooperative and harmonious with respect to this Green Line.
Go ahead, Mr. Lowen.
Yes, I'll quote 23B and C. B speaks to matters other than the question under discussion. He's talking about a relationship between another municipality that has nothing to do with the topic at hand, which is the estimates for transportation. And then, of course, he's persisting in needless repetition. So I think we find that it's a point of order under both of those counts.
Thank you. Is there any other members wishing to comment? Go ahead, Mr. Fian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't believe that this is a point of order. Clearly, the minister himself raised the relationship between himself and the city of Calgary on 2 occasions, and so the pickup of that by this particular member would seem to be quite reasonable and logical. And certainly feeling that you have not got an answer to a question would require you to ask a question yet again. And that will happen throughout estimates on a regular basis. So simply stopping people because they've asked a question once is inappropriate if they have not got a satisfactory answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else, any other members wishing to comment? Hearing, go ahead, Mr. Lowen, you had something further?
Yeah, I think this is a point of order. I mean, it's when we look at he's been talking and asking about this report, and the report is not in this document.
Okay.
So,
thank you, Mr. Lowen. You actually spoke to the matter. I just thought you had something specific to add there. I will caution you. I don't think this is a point of order myself, but just remind members to be cautious of language. The minister is under no obligation. You may not like the answer that he gives you. You may not think it's fulsome enough. That's his prerogative. Let's continue on with the questions. There's a lot of area to cover. We've got 2 hours, and please continue.
Thank you very much. I don't want to spend my whole time on Green Line, but it's such an important topic, Mr. Chair, that it's worthy of spending a chunk of time to really ensure that the minister is clear with Calgarians and all Albertans about the timeline whereby he intends to greenlight this project. Is he talking weeks? Is he talking months until this delay in provincial funding is going to be cleared and the project can go ahead? Because that's what we're waiting for. I mean, it has been intimated that the province wanted to pay last, where in these triple government payment projects where you get municipal and provincial and federal government contributions, typically, not typically, but basically because of the fiscal arrangements of this country, the federal government contribution comes last, yet it has been implied by the province that they wanted to bring forward their contribution last in this particular case. And there's another complicating factor. You're trying to change the financial fiscal arrangements of this type of shared cost project financing in mid-flight here. So I'm not understanding why that has come up as a bit of a red herring. But basically, Mr. Minister, can you give us an idea? Is it going to be delayed till next summer, like 2022, 23? Will the project perhaps never happen?
Well, I'll remind the honourable member, I told him before, but since he's asked again, I'll tell him again. The timing of the expenditures we put right in legislation. So that's not really debatable. The government committed to it in legislation, the timing. And I also will repeat the answer because he asked again. The line as it's currently constituted ends in Inglewood. It doesn't connect to the rest of the system. The people in Southeast Calgary would be very unhappy if their piece of the LRT didn't connect to the whole system as everybody else's piece of the LRT does. So we're working cooperatively with the city. They're working cooperatively with us to find a way to get it connected to the rest of the city, and I don't know, honourable member. It actually, the work that we're doing could speed it up. It could slow it down, I suppose. But I stand by what I said. Sooner is better than later. The instructions that our staff have are to work towards solutions cooperatively with the city. That's what I believe is happening, and I think Albertans can feel good about the fact that their government is working hand in hand with the City of Calgary to get a very important project advanced, which I think
Mr. Minister, I'll stop you there and just continue with a couple of comments about it. And I'm just wondering, with respect to the report that you commissioned on the LRT, the Calgary Green Line project, the analysis you wanted to look at before deciding to fund, why won't you release it, at least in confidence, to either this committee or the chair of the board of the Green Line? I'm not necessarily asking you to release it publicly, but what's the problem with releasing it to either the Green Line board or this committee?
Well, Mr. Chair, the report's not part of this budget. But I will say this, that because we're in contact with the city virtually every day, and they're well aware of how we're trying to help them. There's a very cooperative relationship between our people and the city people. My people tell me we're making progress. the honourable member, frankly, I think wants to introduce something that might slow the process down. I think it's better off to let rather than politicize this, to let the technical people solve the technical problems, which is what I've said that we're doing. And I give the city credit for doing that. They've also decided to let the technical people solve the technical problems rather than making a political football out of such an important project. I think that's the most advisable and best path forward.
Thank you very much,
Mr.
Mr. Minister.
The path that I intend to stay on, because I think that's at the end of the day we'll get the results that are.
Thank you,
most
Mr.
wanted by
Minister.
Albertans.
I've heard you talk about a political football, and I will leave it to the citizens of Calgary to decide who's made it into a political football. But let's move on. We've got lots of other transportation issues to deal with, all right? I wanted to move on to the question of the Transportation Safety Board, if I may. On page 205 of the estimates, line 4, there's a grant to the Alberta Transportation Safety Board. Funding in 2021-22 is reduced to 0, and there's no FTEs, which begs, of course, the simple question, because Albertans are pretty concerned, as you well know, about keeping unsafe drivers off the road. What's going on? Who will do the work of the Alberta Transportation Safety Board? Are you planning to privatize the whole function of the ATSB, or where do its functions move to?
Okay, well, I think the honourable member and my introductions might have heard, and me introduce Wendy Doyle, who will be the head of Safe Roads Alberta, which will be the once the Alberta Transportation Safety Board winds down, that work will transfer to Safe Roads Alberta. I don't know if Ms. Doyle wants to expand further on that. Honourable member, would you like to hear it from the leader of the Transportation Safety Board?
Well, suffice it to say, we're worried about whether the funding's been reduced to what degree, and whether or not the work is actually going to be done. Will we see a diminished level of safety in terms of protecting Albertans from keeping unsafe drivers off the road as a result of this shift?
I think I was quite clear. The work will be transferred to the Transportation Safety Board, which will take up the work of the Alberta, the previous body, the Transportation Safety Board, and would also include the work that was put in place that I made reference to in my opening remarks about impaired driving. We are frankly largely copying a very successful legislation that exists today in British Columbia and Manitoba that reduces impaired driving by a large amount by making immediate consequences. And let me just say this, although some critics of it have tried to say it actually lets people off easy, I can tell you Mothers Against Drunk Driving is very much in favor of this change, because they've seen what's happening in Manitoba.
Let me do a follow-up.
Mr.
Minister, let me follow up if I may.
More safe.
Let me follow up if I may, Mr. Minister, on driver safety, because it appears to be undergoing a major reorganization in your department. Now, driver safety and Safe Road Alberta has a forecast spend of $22.6 million for 2021, and for budget 2021, driver safety initiatives $5.6 million and Safe Roads Alberta $8.7 million are combined at $14.3, or a cut of $8.3 million, a whopping 37%. So is this $8.3 million cut being directed to commercial driver grants to offset MELT training costs? And if so, why are you comfortable with this reduction to driver safety initiatives?
Good question. I can assure you that everything we do is focused on making the roads and driving in Alberta more safe than less safe. I'm just looking to grab the page here, but is this the driver examiner change? Okay, good. It's the driver examiner change where we, if you remember, honourable member, that your government nationalized driver training back a couple years ago, and at that point we went from about 150 some driver examiners down to 77 and fell way far behind, and really Albertans have not been happy since. We worked very hard, and we rather than driver examiners being government employees for class 4, 5, and 6 license, we have privatized those. They'll be delivered through the registry agents. In fact, so
If I may,
there's
I've
less
sa-
people on the, less government employees getting paid out of the
I wanted
public
to
purse.
continue on the theme that you
requires
just
less
mentioned.
money in- No, I'm just, that requires less money in the budget, which largely explains.
Mr. Minister,
what
I'm trying to keep
the
my
question that you asked.
questions short. I'd prefer that we kept our answers succinct as well. So let's try to do that
Let's be
back and
short.
forth. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll try to keep my questions short, Mr. Minister, so we can have a good back and forth exchange here. We talked about safe roads, and I certainly want to talk about one in particular that I used to drive regularly. I'm talking about Highway 628, particularly a piece of it is mentioned in the projects for 2021, but it's only a piece between Highway 14 and Highway 21, paving project between east of 14 and 21. There's no mention of a project to redevelop Highway 628 from Winterburn Road on Edmonton's western outskirts all the way through to Spruce Grove and Stony Plain to make it a regional economic development driver and a congestion reducing and much safer commuter corridor for travelers, many hundreds of travelers and drivers daily. Now, that used to be my commute, Mr. Minister, from my acreage property off of Sand Hills Road, south of 628, into West Edmonton to my real estate office. And I did that 25 years ago, every day, sometimes more than once a day. That road was unsafe then, and it's even worse now. There's been deaths attributed to it. I'm sure you're familiar with this piece of road. There are very good public safety and economic development arguments to upgrading this section of Highway 628, and I really am curious as to why it's not on the priority list. What roadblocks are holding this project back? Is it because part of it is on the northern boundary of the Enoch Reserve? Are there complicating factors there? There's the interchange crossing Highway 60 a problem. I know the roadbed is horrifically soft and it was not constructed right, but it's such a welcome project for so many people in Stony Plain, Spruce Grove, from an economic development standpoint and a safety and decongestion standpoint, that it would seem natural to be higher up and be actually on the construction list.
Well, let me say this, that we look at every road every year in Alberta and consider what's best and what has the best value with the limited dollars we have to spend on them. Highway 628 is not in the budget for rebuilding this year. We consider it in every road that we get requests on every year. I understand it needs some care and attention from time to time, and our people look at it on a regular basis. And when you're, let me say this, I'm grateful when people complain about it, whether they're your constituents or somebody else, because while we look anyways, we don't wait for people to complain to look at them. But when people do, we go and look again to make sure that the roads are safe. And at this point, it's not in the budget. I understand that probably disappoints you, honourable member, but we consider it every single year, and it is not in this budget.
I see that. I appreciate that. I just wanted to definitely highlight it, and because of my familiarity with it, sir, and I can vouch for the fact that it is unsafe. And I mean, your own members who represent Stony Plain and Spruce Grove will probably be vouching for the same thing as an economic development driver that, especially at this time when we need the jobs and the economic development, I don't know why it fell through the cracks and didn't make the grade. So we'll move on, because that's something I certainly have an interest in, is that particular project. I want to talk a little bit about Southwest Henday, Mr. Chair, if I may move on to another small stretch of the highway. And Henday has a little bit of money attributed to it in the budget for upgrading some pavements. And I don't know if this stretch of highway, which was an experimental stretch of concrete slab highway, about 14 kilometers of concrete slab highway that was constructed 15 years ago, and it's failing prematurely. And a mediation of joints between the slabs are required to fix the road waviness that is so bad that commercial vehicles will avoid it entirely. They go all the way around the other way, around the Henday, to avoid that 14-kilometer section of road to get to Highway 2, because it's really not good condition, and it affects their ability to keep the load on the road. And I'm just wondering, the added cost that the transportation carriers are having to go through is really a burden. Now, is this approximately 14 kilometers of concrete road surface part of the pavement rehabilitation project mentioned on page 18 of the provincial construction program?
Thank you, and let me say, honorable member, that we believe all our roads are safe in Alberta. In budget 2021, we have allocated $35.8 million to continue our commitment to expand Southwest Anthony Henday in Edmonton. We're widening it from 4 to 6 lanes, as well as rehabilitating the existing lanes, presumably the ones that you're making remarks about. The project will add a lane in each direction.
To be precise,
and White Mud Drive.
To be precise, Mr. Minister, we are talking about a similar piece of road, but I want to know if this concrete slab section is actually part of the budget process that is considered for this rehabilitation in this budget year.
If the concrete slab sections between White Mud Drive and Calgary Trail, the answer is yes.
This was constructed under a P3 arrangement, as both the ring roads in Edmonton and Calgary were. And given that, I'm wondering, it was an experimental concrete slab project that I don't believe was replicated elsewhere in the province, partly because of this problem with it. But first of all, I want to know, to your knowledge, is there any other example of this concrete slab type of construction in the province that is deteriorating in the same way, 15 years premature? And if so, if it's built under a P3 project, who's actually paying for the remediation? Will it be the province or the P3 contractor? Given these special circumstances, there's kind of a question in my mind as to who would be responsible.
2 of my staff members have now each handed me a note that makes it clear this is not a P3, this section of road. So, and I've also made it clear to you that what we're doing is widening that section of road and doing repairs on what exists now. So the contractor was started in November, got mobilized and got underway in November, 2019. It should be open to traffic in fall 2022, including the new lanes and the repair on the old lanes. So it was always, Anthony Henday, the whole ring road was always designed for future expansion as the traffic builds up, which means the wide outside shoulders will be converted to new lanes in each direction. And the project cost is about $100 million. So I think that answers your questions.
Mr. Chair, one final follow-up with respect to this small piece. Is there any noise remediation involved in this project as well at the same time with the widening? Because there was some discussion with the former minister about noise barrier remediation using berms and or noise barrier walls there. Because I know the issues come up both in Edmonton and Calgary ring roads about noise as a result of heavier volumes of traffic, and it's an expense that the province is being surprised with. And I don't know if you have undertaken to follow through to remediate noise where problems have continually surfaced at certain sections of the ring roads, either in Calgary or Edmonton. Particularly this one in Edmonton Southwest Henday, there's been a history of 15 to 20 years of complaints about the noise abatement not getting built.
Well, let me say this. Alberta Transportation did complete a noise assessment as part of the design for the expansion that we're talking about on Henday. This is on top of 3 noise studies that were completed in 2016 and 17. 2 studies were for the full Southwest Anthony Henday and one specifically for the community of Wedgwood. The majority of the results of the study found that the noise levels were below the current threshold for noise attenuation. However, 2 noise walls are being constructed with the Southwest Widening Project at the communities of Blackburn and Glastonbury. So we don't anticipate noise levels will increase to the threshold for more attenuation when the project is finished. However, we will do sound studies from time to time to see. So I think that answers your question as you posed.
For that, Minister, be prepared for more commentary through the chair. Sorry? I guess be prepared for continued commentary from citizens living adjacent to the ring road in Edmonton and Calgary over noise abatement, because it certainly is an issue that in my constituency, which borders the ring road, it comes up continuously. So I'm sure that you'll hear about it. Absolutely, absolutely. Now, I'm wondering about something that is a big concern to rural Albertans, Mr. Minister, and it has to do with your ministry, and I don't know where to point precisely in the budget to it. But as we all know, in Western Canada, Greyhound no longer operates, with the exception of one line between Seattle and Vancouver. In the interim, since Greyhound ceased operations, I believe in 2018, there have been sort of a hodgepodge of private carriers who have cropped up to try to serve rural Alberta with private bus service and or freight service. But it really is an inadequate service. And I know that the federal government has been called upon to try to assist because it is an interprovincial issue. But from the standpoint of the province, what undertakings have you made as in your ministry, in your department, to facilitate the creation of a workable and economic and viable and efficient inter-community transportation service for bus transportation service in the province? What is your department doing? What are we working on? What money have you got allocated to it?
Well, as you rightly point out, the private sector has traditionally, it's been the intermunicipal bus transportation has been the domain of the private sector. Our government has heard from some of the private bus operators that COVID-19 has knocked the stuffing out of their ridership, and not only the amount of people they get paid to carry, but also the amount of freight. I can tell you there's a number of federal assistance programs that are available to bus operators in Alberta, and our government defers the collection of corporate tax, education property tax, as well as deferring WCB premiums and utility payments. There's also targeted programs such as the Canada Emergency Business Account and the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy. It's expected that intercity bus services will continue to probably suffer until business rebounds and adjusts from COVID-19 like the rest of Alberta's economy. We'll continue to monitor that. I can tell you that I, along with other provincial and territorial finance ministers, lobbied the federal government for more support for intermunicipal bus service. It's an issue that has gotten worse due to COVID, and we will continue to keep track of it, and again, we'll keep pushing for more support for it. But the real answer is to get people back to work and the economy more open, so people have another reason to buy a bus ticket and send freight on the bus.
With all due respect, sir, not only that, it's a public safety issue as well, for not only employment reasons, and relying upon the federal government to provide dollars so that you can pass it along isn't necessarily the plan that folks in rural Alberta are looking for. They are really wanting to make sure that they have, even now in time of COVID, the ability to get on a bus that takes them to a medical appointment or to dialysis in another community. It's the medical, as I'm sure you've heard from people rating into your ministry, there are serious concerns about the life necessities of traveling for medical reasons, and as well as appointments, and also just to travel back and forth. Those people, many people can't fly. People have health conditions. They relied on the bus, and then bingo, it was gone in 2018, and it hasn't been replaced. And it's too much of a hodgepodge to rely on it just settling and sorting itself out, Mr. Minister. I think the province has a real role to play in seeing that rural Alberta doesn't suffer, because you just said people will continue to suffer till COVID-19 relents. That's certainly one of the elements, but I believe that there's a much bigger role to play for the province in coordinating the resurrection of a viable bus service for rural Alberta. And I think that you has been in receipt of the same letter that every MLA was from the association representing the current operators of rural coach services in Alberta, asking the province for assistance.
Yeah, and I would say to you that it's a difficult problem. Greyhound, who was in the bus business, couldn't make a go of it. I can tell you that a rural transportation pilot project in 2018 was begun to test improving transportation on buses in rural areas. It's focused on transportation between Alberta's mid-sized urban centers and the surrounding communities. The pilot project initially targeted communities within 50 kilometers of Medicine Hat, Lethbridge, Red Deer, Camrose, Grand Prairie, and Athabasca that don't have other transit services. It provided targeted municipalities with operating funds. So the pilot is complete March 31st, 2021. Our department will evaluate the effectiveness of it, and we don't know what we're going to do with it after that. It occurs to me, and I'm going to look for my staff to confirm this in case I'm wrong. It seems to me some of the people in the pilot project couldn't spend all the money because of the reduced ridership program, and we've allowed them to continue longer. Am I seeing nods? Yes. Okay. I did get that right without the paper. So we've allowed those that to extend the pilot program to spend the money in it, as opposed to forcing them to spend it running empty buses around during COVID. So we will take a look at that and decide if there's a permanent role for the government of Alberta to play in that area.
Thank you, Minister. Through the chair, I know that it is a difficult issue because you have sparse populations, but I mean, your own business plan suggests that you're very interested in economic development and providing a transportation network that supports economic development, and the rural communities absolutely depend upon the so-called greyhounds of the world to get them connected to the outside world, and somehow this has to be solved. And I think that rural Albertans are looking to you as minister and the provincial government to come up with more than a pilot project and say, well, this didn't work. It has to be solved. And I would suggest perhaps a roundtable of some kind, getting together with the current operators and the federal government and really focusing attention on it, because rural Alberta depends upon that transportation network, and we have an opportunity to maybe come up with a more modern model that works better than what Greyhound did, and that's a challenge that is in front of us, and let's take it as an opportunity and make a platform available for all the parties to actually come together and make a transportation network that serves everybody for the future. We can't just let it ride. So, in any case, let's.
Well, and I would say to you that it's legitimately, and you might even agree with this, somewhat of a chicken and egg issue where you don't have the ridership. It's hard to put the bus on, and if you don't have the bus on, it's hard to get the ridership. So we will, as I said to you, we will continue to consider this to see what happens. But the real thing that'll make this more viable is to have more people back to work, to get vaccines in people's arms. To get people back to work, and that will give us our best look at what can and cannot would make sense, or what does or does not make sense in the future. I agree with you. It's an issue that isn't resolved or solved yet, and we will keep looking at it. I'm sure I'll hear more from you about it as time goes on.
One little bit more, Mr. Chair, on it, and that is that as with many transportation issues with respect to networks across the country, whether it be air, rail, or marine, or roadways, if our public transportation networks are quite often utilizing cross-subsidization in their networks, and that may be something that has to be looked at here, so that we end up with the viability of the rural networks underpinned by the more heavily used transportation lines. So we'll leave that to later, longer discussion. What I wanted to talk to you about briefly was something that is, I think, extremely important, and it's a health issue, but it's also a human rights issue, and that is water tie-ins to Indigenous communities. Now, previous government budgeted $100 million, which, to your credit, you've continued with, and you spent up to that $100 million, but you've certainly offered no more money beyond that, and I'm wondering why. You were not going to budget more money for these water tie-ins until the job is done. These are Alberta communities with every right to have clean, pure, potable water available to them at any time. And right now there's some communities who are left out, Indigenous communities who aren't getting those water tie-ins because you won't provide or allocate any more funding to that program. Why not?
Well, we are operating the $100 million pilot program that the previous government started. If I correctly, I think there's $37 million existing in the program, which we intend to spend on First Nations water tie-ins. Stimulus funding of $13 million over the next 2 years for one project, the extension of a regional water pipeline from Padoka to Ermineskin by the North Red Deer River Water Services Commission, $7.4 million budgeted in 21-22 and $5.6 million in 22-23. So we're still operating that program, and I guess at the end of that, we'll decide whether it ought to be extended or not. But I would say it's a good program, which is why we're still operating it, and we are still trying to wisely spend the budget dollars remaining in the program, as I've tried to describe to you right now. I think we got some good projects coming up.
All right, well, thanks for that, but I really am concerned about the way you characterized what will happen at the end of this expenditure. Once the $100 million is up, you're going to do an assessment to see if it needs to be carried on. I mean, what is there to question? This is water going to Alberta communities, potable, clean, drinking, safe water tie-ins. The need to carry on is there. I mean, the money has to be put out. Why would you not commit right now to saying, yes, we're going to make sure every community in this province has these water tie-ins until if we have to budget more, we're going to spend more.
Remember, the part about this is about this year's budget, and I'm telling you, it's continuing in this year's budget. So next year, I'm sure you can ask the question again, but in this year, it carries on.
All right, well, let's continue on and all right, sounds good. Much appreciate that, Mr. Chair. There's all kinds of road projects that I wanted to potentially talk about, and one of them was a piece between Nisku and Devon, Highway 19 in particular. And I know that the two, I think the eastern and western extremities were projects that were first budgeted for. I believe there's still design work going on for the eastern extremity, but I was wanted to know about the completion of that project, in particular the middle portion, because if we're looking at that Highway 19, it's not to be completed yet this year. Where are we at with that project, I guess?
Okay, well, let me say it was $66 million for the west segment of the three-phase Highway 19 project in 2020. The east segment, 2.4 kilometers between the QE2 and Range Road 253, was complete in September 2019. The twinning of the west segment between Range Road 261 and Highway 60 has now been tendered, and it's currently in the award process. Construction will commence in summer 2021 and is scheduled for completion in 2022. So we understand how important this project is. It's I guess it's fairly complicated, or would have been done a long time ago, but we have, like I said, resources in this year's budget. And after that, phase 3, the middle segment, could proceed when design is complete. The required lands and the lands are secured, and the utilities are relocated, and the environmental permits obtained, and provincial funding becomes available. So it's the middle segment that after we get this, the end that's in the budget this year done, that remains. And I'm sure that we won't forget about it, because you and a bunch of other Albertans will remind us on a regular basis, as they have as long as I've been around here.
Thank you, sir. Something else I want to remind us all about is the concerns that Albertans have over toll roads, toll projects. And the Crete Bridge, the replacement of the Crete Ferry, is one that is, I think, an example that will be brought up over and over again. It concerns a matter of ethics in part, where you have a community that wishes to, in this case, have a ferry replaced by a bridge, and the green light is being given to the project because the community is willing to toll the project, and therefore they get it built way ahead of time frame where the traffic volumes might have allowed it to be approved in a normal process. And I'm wondering, sir, with all due respect, the province, or the population of the province, is looking at that and saying, what in the world's going on here? You got a community that has low traffic. Some estimates so as little as 40 vehicles a day going across that ferry. How in the world are they ever going to be able to finance that bridge cost over time? And what happens if that doesn't happen? What happens if the traffic volume in this or another toll project isn't enough to make the project viable? Who's left holding the bag? It's the province, isn't it? Who's going to end up having to pay for that bridge that's really going to be totally underutilized for perhaps even the life of the bridge? Is that not the case, that a toll project that ends up not being viable becomes the province's responsibility?
Well, I guess I'm a little amazed that you started off, it seems to me, complaining that the province wasn't going to pay for it, and then you finished your question by complaining that the province might pay for it. So I guess you can't be made happy on this. But I will say, I don't think you called it unethical, and I couldn't disagree more. It's very ethical to say yes to Albertans and how they spend their money. You may not want to allow Albertans to spend their own money the way they want to, but I actually think they're quite capable of making spending decisions on their own. We went up there to announce that their aging ferry that's providing less than stellar service was going to be replaced, paid for by the taxpayers of Alberta with a new ferry, and they were quite forceful about saying, no, don't you dare. Don't you dare put in a new ferry. We want a bridge. And we worked through it with them. We went through the numbers with them, and they said worked out about what it would cost for a toll for a truck and a vehicle, a passenger vehicle. And they said a resounding yes, and they said start today. Well, of course, engineering being what it is and environmental approvals being what they are, we couldn't start that day. But they have held strong on their desire. Our government is sensitive to what Albertans want and are listening to them, as we always do. And in this time, they gave us a resounding, we want the bridge and we'll pay for it and you better do it. So we said yes. So you can call that unethical.
Through the chair, I understand that's the decision you made.
Is to listen to Albertans who are our bosses
and
when we can to accommodate them.
Let me interject here and say that you did that and you listened to the folks in Crete on this particular project. You green-lighted a toll, but you also have a responsibility to the larger citizenry of the province, all the taxpayers of the province, to make sure that you're not undertaking projects that are going to end up being your responsibility rather than those of the population that agreed to undertake the toll to get it built. So if in case there is a failure...
The record show you complained about us not paying for it, and then you complained about us paying for it.
That's not what I'm getting at. No.
You did. That's what you said.
Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair.
We're doing so well.
You're bad no matter what we do.
We're doing so well here.
But I think you know what I'm getting at, Mr. McIver. We're talking about the province.
Make us wrong no matter what we do. That's what you're trying to do, and nice try.
I think that you're absolutely wrong in this particular project because there's a risk there that you're not, Mr. Chair. The risk is that the province will be left holding the bag because what I'm trying to get to is that there doesn't seem to be adequate assessment criterion that the province is requiring the toll bridge people to go through. They can, the Crete, you have to do a needs assessment, do you not? Like you're holding up a project in Calgary, the Calgary Green Line, because you think the city is not doing its job, its due diligence, something they don't agree with. But here in the Crete, you're saying go ahead, build a bridge for 40 cars, and we'll be holding the bag if it goes under.
Well, we're assisting with the Green Line, as we established earlier when we were talking, and we are accommodating the fervent desires of the people of Crete and area. In both cases, we're trying to help the citizens of this province achieve their ambitions and their goals, and I think that's what our government is here for.
I think if an Indigenous community decided they would allow a toll to get their water tie-in, that they'd get it earlier?
I think that there is an Indigenous community at one end of the bridge, and we went and talked to them too.
They have to be, would their water tie-in be associated with the toll?
I think all Albertans can spend their money the way they choose without their government telling them, and that includes Indigenous people that are every bit as capable of making those good decisions as non-Indigenous people. You might disagree with that, but we feel strongly that they're equal and equally capable of making decisions.
You're responsible for Alberta tax money.
Thank you, member. You've got about 2 minutes left, and there's plenty of material without building on hypotheticals.
Absolutely. I can tell that my minister and myself are going to enjoy the debate over the transportation issues over the next year and a half here, and look forward to more exchanges, but always keeping in mind that the goal, of course, is to look at spending tax money wisely, and definitely doing things such as approving projects that are in place, like the Green Line, that would be creating 20,000 jobs, to get them underway without unnecessary impediments, and I hope that that happens pretty doggone soon. So what I wanted to end on, I guess, is a couple of other projects that we could ask about as far as the infrastructure build goes for the next couple of years. There's a number of concerns that people have expressed about the roadway in between Edmonton and Calgary, and there's of course the QE2. There's a long-term maintenance project on it. But what about plans afoot to triple the lanes on that roadway? Are there studies that you've gotten underway? Are you looking at doing some interim work or some initial work to plan to widen the QE2 to 3 lanes each way? Because that would involve a massive undertaking, and we're talking about the overpasses and so forth being rejigged. So is that on your radar at all?
Well, first of all, I'm worried about you. You said you're only going to be here a year and a half. Where are you going, honourable member? I was hoping you'd be around longer than that.
Switching seats, maybe. So, anyway, what about QE2 expansion? Is that on your radar? Is there anything?
That concludes the first portion of questions for the official opposition. We'll now move to the Government Caucus for 20 minutes of questions from the members. Would you like to combine your time with the minister if the minister is willing? Minister, you're okay with that?
Chair.
We'll go with Mr. Turt.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Minister, for coming out here today along with the rest of your staff. So I have a number of questions and comments I want to talk about, because obviously this is one of my favorite ministries. Please don't tell the other ministers I said that, but obviously transportation affects everyone here in the province, and especially in my riding of Spruce Grove, Stony Plain. I guess just to kind of kickstart, and I appreciate the member opposite talking a little bit about the areas outside of my riding, so it saves me to asking a couple of those questions. But I first of all just want to commend the minister. I know in the budget there's a significant portion given over to municipal infrastructure rehabilitation, and as the member opposite talked about 628, even though it's not located in my actual riding, it's actually located in the riding of Devon-Drayton Valley, it's still of a significant concern to the 500 residents that use that stretch of road every single day as they go into Edmonton. And as the honourable member across the table would notice, is that there's been significant improvements to that road, especially over the last year or two. And I know, Minister, you've been very receptive to the concerns of the MLAs that are affected by that stretch of road. And one of the key reasons I know why so much of the traffic has been actually diverted from 628 onto 16A and Yellowhead, just north of there, is actually because of transit. And that's kind of where I'm going to start off with the first couple of my questions, because in my prior life as a city councillor, I was very involved in the transit file with the EMRB, working with councillors from all over the capital region on helping build a comprehensive transit plan that will be able to benefit all the 1.2 million residents of the entire greater Edmonton capital region. And so I guess to kind of kickstart us off, I know on the revenue question, revenue side, first of all, on page 105 of the business plan, it talks about the public transit infrastructure fund having dropped. Now, I guess my question and concern, I guess, and Minister, you can perhaps answer this off to kickstart us off, is with this drop, how is the ministry going to continue to support public transit? Are there any issues with long-term sustainability of this needed program? Spruce Grove has one of the most active transit programs in the entire capital region, being the 4th largest, only behind Edmonton, Strathcona County, St. Albert, and then obviously Spruce Grove. And so this is obviously a grave concern moving forward. I mean, long-term sustainability, I know, is something that all municipal partners are always looking for. But when it comes to transit, I mean, we're talking about livelihoods. For many residents, this is the only way that they can get to the store. This is the only way that they can, attend post-secondary school in Edmonton, for example. So when I saw that, I just wanted to run that past you, first of all, Minister, to see, are there any issues with the drop in the fund about how the long-term sustainability of this program will continue?
Well, let me just say this, that the department continues to work with the federal government to look at and advocate for funding for transit projects. The drop in funding that you make reference to on page 105 of the ministry business plan actually signifies the federal government and the province wrapping up the program, as the majority of the projects will be completed by March 21st, 2021. And as I discussed with the member opposite a few minutes ago, we don't know what we're going to do after this. We'll have to evaluate what worked and what didn't. Some of that program will live a bit past March 31st, simply because several of the participants in the pilot project couldn't spend the money during COVID because they lowered the frequency of their service because of the reduced ridership and the reduced freight. So rather than have them run 6 buses down the road every day with 4 of them empty, we've allowed them to reduce the intensity of what they're doing. So we're continuing our commitment to support municipal transit projects by providing $47.9 million over 3 years through the Green Transit Incentive Program, the Green Trip. Of course, we're committed to the LRT growth in Calgary and Edmonton, as I talked about with the member opposite. That's where we're at with that. It's honestly the intermunicipal transit largely has always been a private sector function. We're hoping the private sector will rise again. It started to rise, and with some links carried on by private sector operators before COVID. I don't know which or how many, or whether all or none of them will continue after that. We will have to take a look at that and evaluate what the next steps will be.
Well, thank you very much for that, Minister. And I guess on the same topic, but on the expense side, I see that there have been some significant increases regarding transportation grants and municipal transit granting programs. And from what I was saying before about the importance of this valuable program and service to many people that live in urban areas, and I didn't realize it's just not Spruce Grove and Stony Plain or even larger municipalities like Edmonton or Calgary, but it's a critical service. I mean, for many people, they can't exist and operate on a daily basis and provide for their families without this program. So I see there is an increase there, and that it would behoove me to not mention or at least ask the question about, can you kind of talk about some of the philosophies that your ministry has had that would help lead to these types of increases? And from I won't say a philosophical perspective, but where do you see transit is in terms of importance on behalf, pertaining to your portfolio? And I'm thinking specifically of a couple of conversations I had with some City of Edmonton councillors that I served with for many years, Councillor Walters and Councillor Knack, both fantastic representatives on the transit front. And I know these are the types of questions that they've asked me that we've talked about in terms of long-term sustainability. So just wondering perhaps if you can talk on the expense side about the importance of transit to your ministry.
Well, let me say this. Transit is largely a municipal function. And I that was true when I was on a municipal alderman for 9 years, from 2001 to 2010. The province provides capital support and when they can, from place to place and time to time. I see it in the future as being a combination of a municipal program and a private sector program. If you're asking Do we plan upon the province of Alberta replacing Greyhound? I think the answer is a straight out no. So we'll continue to work with our partners in the private sector and municipalities, as well as the federal government, to look at where we can support public transit. We stay in touch with municipalities. Outside of the Calgary and Edmonton projects, we find places where we can support regional transportation. I know that the municipalities around the capital region have started a transit commission. We gave them a little bit of a hand to get going. But at the end of the day, we don't see ourselves as leading this parade. We see the municipalities as the private sectors as leading this parade, and when some opportunities come up to help out, I could see that happening in the future. But I don't see this as being a provincial government operating unit, intermunicipal transportation.
Okay, excellent. Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left remaining?
You've got 11 minutes and 30 seconds.
Perfect. I guess my next question, to kind of take a break from transit, is again, I want to talk a little bit about water. And both on the revenue and expense side, I know, for example, on the same business plan on page 105, it talks about the clean water, wastewater fund dropped substantially. And I guess, again, back to long-term sustainability. I mean, with a substantial drop, how is the ministry supporting plans to promote clean water in our province? Again, in my prior life, having served on the Parkland Water Commission for many years and being responsible for setting water rates and making sure that the residents out west of Edmonton received clean drinking water, as well as helping participate in the ability to clean that water after it has been used. I guess I just wanted to, again, get your thoughts on the drop on the revenue side when it came to the wastewater fund. And again, just to really put my own mind at ease that this was going to be sustainable or not going to affect the long-term sustainability of this program.
Well, I think you're seeing a drop, but what you're really seeing is the hangover from a big increase. What happened is the federal government announced total funding to Alberta of $196.7 million in 2016-17 under its Clean Water Wastewater Fund to provide municipalities through the Department of Transportation for projects that contribute to various water treatment and distribution infrastructure. The decrease in funding that you refer to on page 105 of the ministry business plan actually signifies that this program between Alberta and the federal government is wrapping up. In other words, the funding is complete. So the federal government funds up to 50% of a project, with the provincial government funding up to 40% from the Water for Life program. And on top of that, we provided provincially $150 million in stimulus funding over multiple years, was provided in 2020, 2021 under the Alberta Recovery Plan for water projects. And actually, Honourable Member, I want you to know that it's not so much that we quit on it. We actually chewed up a lot of the backlog with the stimulus spending last year, and some of that hangs over to this year and maybe even a little bit next year, because so the wastewater and water support programs are always oversubscribed 8-10 years out ahead. So we did substantial catch up. So what you characterize as a reduction, and if you're only looking at the numbers, I suppose you could legitimately say that, but if you're actually looking at the results, the fact is the federal government gave some money, which we pushed out into the world to help municipalities and others connect their water systems. And last year, $150 million in provincial stimulus went out. So what we've done is we've caught up on a lot of the backlog. I'm not diminishing how important fresh water and well-treated wastewater is to Albertans, but what you're seeing now is the after effects, I suppose, of a lot of spending being advanced over the last few years. I think at this point you'll see more of what I would call a normalization of the amount of money that will be spent in future years. And because of this advance from the federal government and our own stimulus, I'm hopeful at least that the amount that we're behind in approving grants to people with these projects will be less far behind than we used to be because of the stimulus, both federally and provincially, that went into the water and wastewater systems.
Well, thank you very much for that, Minister. And I appreciate you talking about the backlog that existed because as anyone that was involved in that in prior years knows that it was just tough to get those funds to be able to catch up per se. And I appreciate and applaud your efforts to make significant headway in that regard, especially over the last 2 years. I guess when you talk about backlog, and I realize that especially municipalities will always say that they're never completely caught up. But when you look at more of a long-term approach, I guess kind of if you can just elaborate on that one component a little bit about how we're making progress as a government to make sure that those water and wastewater projects are being looked after and enhanced around the province. I know, for example, one industrial development that happened west of Edmonton ate up almost 10 years worth of reserve water supply with just one simple industrial plant at Champion Pet Foods in Atchison. And so when you talk about, we always seem to be, we have to plan for years in advance is 100% correct. And I guess I just wanted to get your take on where you see the ministry in terms of taking care of that backlog and how you're catching up per se from past years where maybe there wasn't the right amount of attention given to this valuable project.
I would say to you that it's about more than just money. I want you to know that I have encouraged municipalities that have applied for and even received provincial grants for their water and wastewater projects, that if they don't have a capital replacement project in their rate structure, to put one in. Because frankly, if we haven't forced it on municipalities per se, but I would say that somebody that has a wastewater system and it's been in place for 40 years and comes to us and say, "Will you replace it for us?" The first question out of my mouth is, "How much have you saved? How much have you put in your rate structure to contribute towards the replacing of it?" If the answer is zero, I usually complain to them. That's a polite way to put it, complaining to them. Because I know how important it is. And every time you pay for a second wastewater treatment system for one municipality, it's a second one that doesn't get their first wastewater treatment system. Or if when we put in a second water treatment system for a municipality that's had one, then another municipality doesn't get their first water treatment system. So we're trying to keep up with the grants and stuff, but we're trying to encourage responsible behavior by municipalities and our partners to do this. And also the other thing is on technologies. I know you and I are former municipally elected people. I know the city of Calgary at one point added, I can't remember how many years or decades to their water supply by insisting upon low flow toilets and insisting upon water metering. There was no incentive for people before meters were on their home to fix leaks. But once the meters went on, by golly, those leaks got fixed because people could see the leak in their monthly bill. So I think you're right to encourage us to keep the support for the water and wastewater treatments going forward. But I would also say to you to encourage ourselves and our partners to responsibly use that water using in the most efficient way, so we waste less of it, so that less has to come out of the rivers, and also to return it to the rivers in as good or better condition than we took it out, so that when it goes back into the river, that those downstream don't suffer ill effects. So all of it. It's not an either or, it's a both, or it's all of the above that I think we have to work on.
Oh, excellent. And I'm glad you recognize that, Minister. So my last question I have is on actually page 205 of the government estimates, and it really talks about the substantial increase to the commercial driver grants program that was put in place. Obviously, this is a growing sector right across the entire province. I mean, Albertan companies have to move goods and services from one end of the province to the other. And so I guess my question is, why was this substantial increase put in place? I know for that sector and for many of the businesses that depend upon transportation of goods are obviously going to be happy. And I guess if I can get a little bit more of a perspective about how this affects the unemployment levels in this important sector. Was this an attempt to booster this sector and make it grow, or was there some other underlying philosophy that perhaps the ministry was using about why they wanted to support this one industry when there's so many other needs right around the entire province?
Well, let's face it. trucking is an essential service. There's so many services that are essential, but this is one, and particularly that was made obvious during COVID, because what were people worried about when they were told to stay home? They were worried about there was going to be food in the grocery store and there was going to be medicine in the drugstore. They were worried about other things too, but let's face it, we all remember the toilet paper shortages, because somehow people got the idea there wouldn't be that anymore. But the same thing would have happened if they believed there wasn't going to be fresh vegetables or fresh meat or canned goods. So we're committed to the mandatory entry-level training program to increase the standards for truck drivers. But that is expensive, and it's harder for people to do. So while we're busy trying to make it less expensive and more attainable for people, and more equally attainable across Alberta, because some people in areas outside of Calgary and Edmonton, for example, find it harder to get to where they can get training and get access to a truck to do their training in, and one thing and another. So one of the things that the increase is from, and I'm going to look for my my staff to nod here. I think we passed the hat here a little bit with other ministries. Yes. Yeah, labor contributed some, the labor ministry and CSS, because there's a big shortage of truck drivers. It's expensive. We were trying to bring the cost of training down, so that's where some of that extra funding in there goes. And we are still working. And again, the easy answer to a problem is to spend more money. But the harder answer, which we're also trying to do, is trying to make the training less expensive. Where, for example, we're considering delivering some of it online, looking for ways to use apps or simulators to do the training. We're going to put in place a driver's license because actually, interestingly enough, it's some people find it easier to rent or borrow an automatic transmission truck. So we were going to offer a automatic transmission only license. So if you take your test in automatic, that's the only thing you can drive. But some people say that's all they ever will drive with who they want to work for. We're looking for ways to consider the hours, or not hours, but years of experience with the Class 3 license to count towards the hours needed for your Class 1. We've got a whole bunch of efforts coming forward. Not just throwing money at the problem, but actually trying to make the problem easier to solve outside of just throwing money at it. So we're, in the meantime, we've with some help, got some more money to help with the training. But really the longer term solution is to also push to make the program easier to deliver in a more cost effective way, so that people that want to drive a truck for a living can do so and have that dignity of being self-reliant with a full-time job.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for answering my questions, Minister.
Thank you very much, everyone. The government member's first block of questioning is now ended. Now we move to the next round, which consists of 5 minutes of questions from the members, followed by 5 minutes of response from the minister. As mentioned, members can ask to advise the chair at the beginning of their rotation if they wish to combine their time with the minister's time for a combined total of 10 minutes. Absolutely. We can go ahead, Mr. Daff.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Pleased to resume questioning once again, Mr. Minister. I wanted to touch on a question that I'm sure you're familiar with from your civic days as well as now with the Transportation Ministry. That is the supply of aggregate in this province, Mr. Minister. I know that part of the objective in the strategic plan was to prioritize infrastructure projects and get them built. And one of the major components in any infrastructure project is aggregate, in other words, sand and gravel. And the deposits of sand and gravel that are proximate to major centers where it's being consumed for the most part is more and more scarce. But also there are difficulties where the deposits exist, of course, in mining those deposits because of the public's desire not to have a gravel pit next to their acreage properties. There's a lot of NIMBYism there, and it's a problem that has to be respected. So I know that the Alberta Sand and Gravel Association, the Alberta Concrete Producers, the Alberta Road Builders and Heavy Construction Association, indeed the whole construction industry is concerned about this as a long-term issue. And I know that my father, having been involved in the construction industry as well as a superintendent, had this as a concern, getting concrete for projects. We have to go further and further away from major centers to get aggregate. It adds to the cost. But by the same token, the stuff that's closer in is usually surrounded by acreage properties, and it confounds the development of those aggregate deposits. So I'm wondering what long-term strategy you might have for maybe looking at land use regulations or some other way of mitigating the acrimony that takes place over developing aggregate deposits that are efficient, that are more accessible and affordable and economic, that are closer into the major centers, that will accommodate the needs to respect landowners, as well as the requirement that we have the adequate, affordable supply of aggregate for industry.
Well, that's a good question. Let's face it, everybody wants a house with a concrete foundation, but they don't want the cement to come from close to where they live, and they don't want the gravel in the cement, in the concrete, to come from close to where they live either. So what you called NIMBYism, I would say, is probably well expressed. I think this is that's at the heart of it. It's a bit of a land use issue that you might want to pose again when you get to Alberta Environment and Parks. But I will say this, that one of the things that we need to do is also, and you talked about several industry groups, ASGA, road builders, the cement and concrete groups. I think also we need to encourage them to find technologies that seem less imposing upon people when you're extracting gravel, whether it's crushing in a place or in a way that's quieter, less reducing dust, reducing noise, all the usual irritants. And also, I think probably to the public we probably need to continue to do some education on just how important gravel and concrete is to the quality of life that we all have in the entire economy. So there's no, if there's a perfect answer, honorable member, I'd be grateful if you would tell me what it is. I've got a hunch that you're going to say you need to keep working on it, which we are, or we will, and I would agree with you on that. Having government-owned pits sometimes reduces the issue for municipalities, but nonetheless, we still have to pass the Alberta environment standards too. So, and we get the same complaints as non-government gravel pits do. So it's, you pointed to a perfect problem with no ready solution. So congratulations.
I'm just wondering, though, with respect to this issue, Mr. Minister, do you not see at least a mediating role for your ministry in conjunction with environment, because it's such an essential ingredient for economic development in this province, aggregate, to solve the issue in a way that allows the affordable extraction of gravel deposits even in populated areas. There are some solutions you suggested, but what role does the ministry have, in your view, to facilitate this discussion and move towards solutions?
We try to help them.
Drift a little bit off of the intent of this meeting, but I'll allow the minister to answer the question. But I think we need to kind of stick to the business plan and the budget documents.
Sure. Thank you, Chair.
Discussion. It's not an extra big budget discussion, but I will say to the honorable member, we try to help where we can. I know a letter come across my desk today between a gravel company and they want us to try to mediate with the local municipality, and we'll try to do that. And when we're asked to, we're always happy to try. But that I agree with the honorable member. That's a partial solution, but we need to look at other ways to mitigate the NIMBYism as well, and also lessen the actual, I guess, what people would call irritants, if there's technological ways to do that.
Thank you, Minister. In the budget you talked about, I believe it's in your recovery plan, there's $2 million looking at rail transport that's mentioned there, and in the fiscal portion of it. I believe this is for Alberta Transportation. What are those dollars spent on? Is it to look at the Alaska Railway project? What in the world is the Alberta Transportation rail portion, the $2 million in the recovery plan, being spent on?
Do you mind me asking which page in our budget?
It's in the recovery plan. I don't have the page exact right now in front of me. But tell you what, you can get back to me in writing on that. But while I'm on the topic, I know that there was some discussion about the Alaska Railway project. seems to have gone off the rails. Is it still a thing?
Oh, yeah, yeah, no, and let me just say this, I can only answer questions on the budget, so the other ones is from something other than the budget. You may have to wait to get that somewhere else, but we are working together collaboratively with the Alberta to Alaska Rail folks. It could be really exciting. I don't know yet where the money's going to come from to build it, but of course there's a lot of things produced in Alberta that could get to market if that ever came to fruition. Agriculture, forestry, energy products, and even manufactured goods going to and coming from Asia and other parts of the world. So it's a project that I think has tremendous potential. And it even has a presidential permit that both the old president in the U.S. and the new president seem to agree on, that presidential permit's a good idea. So it's got so I would say we're going to continue working along with the proponents and helping where we can. We've been in contact with Northwest Territories and the Yukon governments and Indigenous people along the way to try to assist where we can. The big question that remains unanswered for me is exactly how it's going to be paid for, but we will help along as best as we can, because I for one believe it could benefit Alberta a great deal over a long number of years if it ever comes to fruition.
This budget, are you spending money on feasibility studies at all with respect to that particular project or not?
Mostly providing I suppose some technical help, some advice, helping make connections between the railroad and Indigenous people along the way, trying to assist that way, but we don't have a financial stake in it.
All right.
Correct me if I'm wrong. I got the big head shake no, so we don't have a financial stake in it.
I wanted to ask a question through the chair about the cost of vehicle inspections. Now, I know in Alberta that the price of an individual must pay to have an out-of-province vehicle inspected is not regulated in other provinces as well, but the price can vary quite a bit. And I've got before me a letter from a constituent saying that he got quotes from $100 to $300. And the ministry's website indicates that it's just basically buyer beware. Go find your private provider and you pick the best one. Make sure they satisfy your needs. But I'm wondering, sir, if we shouldn't be looking at what the parameters are for a supplier to provide to satisfy the out-of-province vehicle inspection requirements at a cost that isn't so widely variant. I think a 300% variance seems unusual and unnecessary. Should we be relying upon buyer beware and letting the market decide the cost of a service that the province has mandated must be bought by the public who want to bring a car into the province?
Well, I think that it's incumbent upon people that are buying something to shop around. Buyer beware is a legitimate thing.
Thank you, Minister. I hesitate to interrupt, but we will move on to rotation with the Government Caucus. Are you wishing to go back and forth with the Minister for a full 10 minutes? And who is your speaker? Mr. Getson, are you online? Go ahead,
Yeah,
Mr.
I
Getson.
sure am. Let's hope this is working. Okay, Minister, well, thank you very much. It was very interesting to hear some of the opposition members talking about rail projects. I'm obviously, you know, I've got a one-track mind in a lot of regards, so that was exciting to hear that others are picking up on that. But if I could pivot back to outcome 3.3 on 104 of the Ministry Business Plan, it says it's going to investigate and enhance or opportunities to enhance market access and mobility for transportation users to support routes connecting major industrial, manufacturing, and high-load corridors and hubs. So given that, what are some of the key transportation investments that the government's made or will make to support this outcome?
Okay, thank you, honorable member. Here we go. Last year, we announced a series of strategic stimulus projects, including twinning of Highway 3 from Taber to Burdett, the construction of the 65th Avenue Bridge from the Edmonton International Airport to Leduc, which I think will be important. We also announced the twinning of Highway 15 from and through Alberta's industrial heartland The project supports two multi-billion-dollar petrochemical facilities planned in Sturgeon and Strathcona counties and enhances the high load corridor and alleviates congestion on the Highway 15 bridge. High load corridor development, of course, enhances our market access. Several projects on the current construction program on critical trade are replacement of, interesting enough, two wooden plank truss bridges on Highway 88 of Wabasca River with much more substantial bridges that will be important for economic development. Designing for the Highway 15 grade widening project between the towns of Lamont and Highway 834. The construction of the Tofield bypass on Highway 834 to reduce congestion and delays while separating industrial and other large vehicle traffic from local vehicle and pedestrian traffic. It's never ending. So that you could probably look at that list I gave you and just said that's only a 10th or a 20th of what you should be doing, and I would agree with you on that. But we got to live within our budgets and what we can get through Treasury Board and what it's reasonable to ask the taxpayers to finance. So you're right in your emphasis on these things, because that's where the future jobs and economic development of our province lies.
No, I appreciate that. And a quick follow-up, Minister, just with Highway 60, is it still on the books or being contemplated?
Highway 60 is still on the books and contemplated. And when somebody hands me a piece of paper, I'm going to try to give you a little bit more precise. There we go. Highway 60 is committed to move forward with other major improvements to Highway 60 west of Edmonton. It includes twinning 60 between 16 and 16A and construction of an overpass over the Canadian National Railway tracks and realignment of the interchange at Highway 16A. Let me say this. We are going to do this, but some of the prep work has taken a little while. Getting the utilities lined up and moved and getting agreements with the railroads and making plans to deal with the traffic congestion during construction, because I don't think I have to tell you, it's in your writing, how busy that area is. And but it's also a safety issue, because separating the CNR rail tracks from Highway 60, we think is going to be a big safety boost. The project's currently in the design and land purchasing phase. The land purchasing phase can go really fast if we say to somebody, you want to sell us your land, and they say yes, and we agree on a price. If we don't agree on the price, or they don't want to sell us their land and we have to expropriate, then that could take longer. So all that is underway. There's land acquisition for two major properties is outstanding on Highway 60. But I could tell you that pre-construction activities such as the utility locations will have a start date in 2021. We still have to negotiate some utility crossing agreements. That's under discussion, and some adjustments and relocations of utilities. So the timeline is a bit inexact, I'm sorry to say, but it's underway. Construction's now anticipated to begin, could be as early as 2024 and as late as 2026. And you say 2 years is a big difference, and the 2 years is utility moves, land acquisition, all that kind of stuff. It's I think part of the reason it wasn't done before now isn't so much that everybody didn't agree it had to be done. It's just a complex project. We do a lot of stuff where you got to do this, but this has more examples of utilities to be moved and rail to work around and all that stuff. You'd probably be a lot happier.
I appreciate the response. I'll turn it over to MLA Lowen from Peace Notley then.
Go ahead, Mr. Lowen.
Okay, thank you very much, Minister. Appreciate your comments tonight. It's been good to hear the focuses that you have on safety. And on that regard, we've seen information coming out regarding the Commercial Safety Rest Areas project. And I think this would fall under line 5.4, other infrastructure maintenance on page 202 of government estimates. It also may fall under section 3, traffic safety programs. And I just wanted to know if you could provide information on the decision-making process of these rest areas, where they'll go and what the criteria is on those.
Okay, well, the decision-making process has to do, we've talked to the Alberta Motor Transport Association, right, and got their input on where they think we need more safety rest areas. We don't have enough of them in Alberta, and some of the ones we have, we think they need to be better. And by better, I mean having a place for a truck driver to pull off and sleep and crawl into the cab behind in their truck and get a nap or a sleep is good. Not nearly as good as having a bathroom in a restaurant and a convenience store so that they can meet their other human needs while they're on the road. So we want to, we know, we've heard from the trucking industry and just from actually, interesting enough, car drivers too, because listen, we're not all created equally, and some members of the motoring public can go longer between bathroom breaks than others can. That's polite, right? What I just said. So, and they've said, and they spoke up and legitimately. So we're trying to meet those needs. So, and we're looking to do that. We're looking for potential sites and where we could have highway rest areas where they're needed. There's land available, or where we can make an agreement to purchase land. And not only for a parking lot, but for some commercial development. So it's a recently engaged municipalities on some of their concerns. Some municipalities have said build one here, and others have said don't build one here because they don't want business taken away from their downtown or their business section. And we understand all of that. So we're trying to not interfere with that and yet have services for truck drivers. And if you're driving a 55-foot, trailer around and there's heavyweight stuff in it, they don't necessarily want to go into downtown, small town Alberta. Not that it's not a beautiful place, it's just not the easiest place to tool around with your 55-foot trailer on your truck. So what we're trying to do is actually create places to provide what the industry's told us they need. A restaurant, even if it's a quick serve restaurant, a bathroom, convenience store, and a gas station where the basic services can be had on the side of the road, and where people won't try to drive another 10 kilometers or 20 kilometers when they're falling asleep because they have to. It's the industry's told us that it's a real safety issue that we need to take seriously.
Okay, thanks, Minister. And you've kind of touched on my next question already, talking about the I've had some communities in my constituency that express concerns regarding the effects of these on already struggling rural businesses and communities. So how can a ministry ensure that these commercial safety rest areas will not have negative impacts on rural businesses and rural communities?
Well, hopefully by providing the basic services that are needed and in most cases not overdeveloping them. I guess we don't want to put shopping malls on the side of the highway. But a hamburger stand or a quick service restaurant, a convenience store, a gas station, which might contain the convenience store, that kind of stuff, I would say is kind of we're going to try to make that a minimum. And I appreciate if you're in the small town next door and you run a hamburger stand, that might offend you. On the other hand, we can't have the person of the 55-foot trailer go through your drive-through out there. So it's honorable member. It's probably not perfect. But we're trying to bridge those gaps, and where we get advice from MLAs or from municipalities, we will try to listen and make the adjustments we can, keeping in mind the industry says they need those basic services: a bite, a bathroom, a gas station, and a convenience store for personal needs that different people might need.
Thank you very much, Minister. Appreciate that. Obviously, that consultation going forward will be very important, and I appreciate your remarks.
Sorry to interrupt, members. We'll now move on to the opposition for 5 minutes and combined with the Minister for a total of 10. Go ahead, Mr. Dack.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Continuing on with Mr. Minister, I had some discussions with industry members in the construction industry, highway in particular, road builders, and one of the messages I got from that, Minister, was that given that we have a highway system that basically is a $70 billion asset, their message was that they are seeing it managed on a quarterly basis, which is really not the way you should handle such a large investment. I've been told that Treasury Board directives bind or allow transportation to tender up to 75% of the anticipated budget based on the third quarter, and they were looking for more flexibility so that they can tender beyond the current year. Is that something that you're having discussions with Treasury Board about, so that the contractors can tender beyond the current year and have a greater amount of stability and predictability in what the contracts that might be available to them are, so that they can decide whether or not they're going to keep an asphalt plant here in Alberta or move it elsewhere if it's not going to be used. These are the types of major infrastructure decisions within their businesses they have to make, and it's really difficult for them to do so on short-term directives that Treasury Board has on the tendering process right now.
I would say yes, kind of. And what I mean by that is we, of course, is it 70 or 75? I'm not arguing with you. 70. 70, it is 75 years old. Okay, so that's true, and that's part of how we're trying to help with that, with letting the industry know as early as possible what kind of work will be coming up the following year. But more than that, we're also trying to get on a bit more of a regular program. You've probably heard me say in question period and other places, not that you follow me around and listen much, but that my emphasis, as long as I'm here, is fixing the current network. I'm trying to get us to a more consistent annual amount of maintenance and repair work, so that those contractors that do that for us know that they have in their minds, they tell me that if we're going to use about 3 million tons of asphalt in a year, that they can plan ahead based on that. So that's sort of what you're saying, not exactly, but that's what they've told me, is if they can depend upon that, they can kind of plan for buying equipment and hiring people and training people and when to resell and when to get new or used equipment for the upcoming years and all that kind of stuff. And we're trying to stay in touch with the industry to meet their needs that way, because we don't do our own road work. We have it done for us. If we don't have a healthy industry, we're kind of dead in the water for fixing our roads and bridges. So we are truly in regular communication with the industry.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Minister. Let's follow up in further discussions about that issue. I'm glad that you're onto it, and I think there's some more detailed discussion to be had about that process between yourself and Treasury Board and the ongoing construction projects that our industry members want more stability in on an annual basis. Let me return to MELT for a moment, if I might. Everybody's agreed that MELT training is a good initiative. Obviously, that's why you carried it forward. But I wanted to focus and ask for an update on where you're at on MELT. And you've touched on this already to a certain extent, but with respect to the following groups, general commercial drivers, for one, busing and school busing for another, and on the agricultural sector and the extension for farmers. Where are we at with respect to those following groups? Start with the general commercial drivers and MELT.
Okay, I would say to you, with the regular commercial drivers, and you heard me give some of this answer before, we're trying to make the training and of MELT more accessible and more affordable for them. The government has capped the training for MELT at $10,000. But that is prohibited for some people. And I guess if you compare it to a college or a university education, it's fairly inexpensive. But people tell me that they don't always have $10,000 to invest in getting a driver's license to get a job there. So we're trying to make that affordable. We're trying to make it available through online training. We're working with other provinces to see if simulators could be used as part of it. We are working with trying to recognize somebody that's got verifiable years of experience with a Class 3 license for it to count towards some of the hours in a Class 1. We're making available a automatic license, automatic transmission license, and people that get that wouldn't be qualified to drive a standard on a Class 1 unless they took additional qualifications. We're doing all that stuff, and we're trying to make it more affordable. And we are also working with other provinces that think that they have pretty good programs, and we think they have pretty good programs, to see what ideas we can steal from them to bring to Alberta to make the training more affordable, more effective, and get more people in the driver's seat, because I think you might be onto the fact that we actually are going to need more driver's licenses in the future. Moving on to busing, we're trying to work with bus companies allow school boards, for example, to do their own in-house training for melt, so that classroom style, which schools obviously are probably pretty good at doing classroom style training, so that they can get the school bus drivers in place before September comes each year, and so that's underway. Now, here's the other thing too, is that other provinces and territories are not moving as fast on the class 2, on the commercial drivers, or the bus drivers as we are. We're committed to melt, and we're going to stay with it. We're a little afraid of getting too far ahead of the country in case they decide to go take a left or a right on the way, and they decide they all want all their programs a lot different than ours after we have a huge investment. So we're trying to bring the other provinces and territories along with us.
For that, with respect to that point, Mr. Chair, I wish to ask you about your coordination with the North American system with respect to melt, because I know that there's some work in your department to try to ensure that you're coordinating with the American system as well, and the requirements there.
I mean, Melt came to us from the United States. They're the ones that said your drivers are not going to be able to cross the border into the U.S. unless they have a melt designation. And then so we did what we thought was a fairly well planned out 2-year transition, and then the U.S. turned around and said, yeah, we're putting it off for a year. I suppose we could have put it off for a year, but we said, no, we're into this thing. We believe it's a higher standard of training. We're not backing away from it. So we're going to work harder on making it more affordable and more accessible for people. We think that's the right thing to do. I think Albertans want better trained drivers of these huge vehicles. So we feel good about that, but we kind of feel like we got taken for a bit of a ride by the U.S. by demanding it and then backing off themselves. But let's face it, they are our biggest customer, so we need to respect that.
Through the chair, Mr. Minister, on the final piece, the agricultural sector and the extension for farmers with respect to melt, where are we at with that?
Well, we have said that we won't extend that any further, that those that were caught in the transition in the previous government have to have their work done by a certain date. If they don't get it done, we're going to try to make it as affordable and accessible as we can to get them trained in the driver's seat. We oftentimes get people asking us for a different agricultural license for Class 1 vehicles, but we think if you're driving the same vehicle at the same speed under the same conditions on the same road, you need to have the same license. It doesn't make everybody
chair,
happy, but for the standpoint of safety, we think that's a defensible position.
I want to get one final point in, well, if I may, Mr. Chair, and that has to do with the 511 system. Of course, that's the information system on Alberta's roads and highways and the conditions reports that travelers rely upon, either commercially or private citizens driving, to get up-to-date road and traffic reports and road condition reports on Alberta highways. And I'm wondering what performance measures are in place to ensure that that system is operating properly, that it's being utilized effectively, that is worthwhile, and because I've got some concerns about the whole program, that it's actually doing what it's supposed to do, and I was wondering what your analysis is of it.
I like it. I use it on a regular basis. So if you're finding shortfalls, I would actually welcome you pointing that out to me, and we will investigate them. I think 511 is very important. It's an inter-provincial system, if you will, something with some familiarity. If somebody's traveling across the country to dial 511 or go online to 511 and get the information, I want that to be true here, and I will welcome your input on that.
Thank you, Minister. We will now move to the Government Caucus for the final 3 minutes. Back and forth. Go ahead.
Thank you. Through the chair to the minister. So mentioned on page 104 of the business plan, the Transportation Ministry is investing $904.9 million for ring roads, new construction and expansion of provincial highways in 21-22. And I'm personally very pleased with the government's commitment to improving roads for my constituents in Calgary, particularly with the expansion of Stoney Trail. Through the chair to the minister, can you please explain to us how this investment will benefit Alberta's economy, and also what this investment means for job creation?
Well, I think if we make it easier for people in trucks in particular to make their way either quickly to the city or quickly through the city if they got somewhere else to go, that will and make the that trip more affordable, more cost effective, more profitable, and will encourage people just to do more business here. When it's complete, the Calgary Ring Road will have over 100 kilometers of free flow traffic in the Calgary region. The Edmonton Anthony Henday Ring Road has been, I think, a big boon, and it's a real fun combination of helping the business community with their shipping of goods and services, along with it takes some pressure off of commuter traffic. So because even though the Ring Road is built more for the to accommodate commercial activity and jobs and whatnot, there are many instances where drivers going to work in their car will find an advantage to using that different route, and the more we convenience people, I think the more competitive our economy will be, and the more people want to come here with their jobs and businesses to create more economic activity. It's you never know really where the circle begins and ends, but I do think the more convenient we make it for people to live their lives and be efficient.
I apologize for the interruption, Minister, but I must advise the committee that the time allotted for consideration of the ministry's estimates has concluded. I'd like to remind the committee members that we are scheduled to meet next on March 9th, 2021. That's tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. to consider the estimates of the Ministry of Treasury Board and Finance. For health reasons, please remember to take any drinks and other items with you as you leave. Thank you, everyone. This meeting is adjourned.